Hey everybody, it's Nick. For today's quick tutorial, I'm going to look at how to export assets from 3D Studio Max with their textures and their animations. By default, these don't pop into Unity so well, so we have to change a couple of settings. What I did in Studio Max is a really basic setup where I made kind of a planet Jupiter, and it's a textured sphere with a like a spherical UVW map. Let me take a look at that. And I've animated it in two ways. One, I've put it on a path controller so that it can move around, and then two, I keyframed the Z like rotation so that it kind of spins even as it orbits, and that just gives us a sense of like what kind of animation we would be able to export into Unity so that it actually looks like something. I'm not going to go through how to animate or any of that kind of stuff, but just basically showing how that works. If you have anything that is a modifier based animation or a space warp animation, the technique I'm going to show you is not going to work. You're going to have to refer to one of my other videos or someone else's tutorial. Okay. But if we're interested in exporting something like this as a simple kind of texture map and animation, this method should work for you. Doesn't matter what version of Studio Max you're using. This should work for pretty much everything all the way through the last like decade or so. I'm using 2021 right now just because. So anyway, I've got my Jupiter. I'm going to go ahead and go to File and say Export Selected. I don't need any of the other objects because the animation is going to actually come with it. I don't need the path in this case. I'm just going to go, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to say Export Selected. And what you want to do is go to FBX. That's the format that works best for exporting. And in this case, I've already got a file started, so I'm just going to write over this Planet Demo FBX. Going to go ahead and replace it. Now in the FBX presets, the defaults are pretty good to start with. Just keep smoothing groups, turbo smooth, all this stuff. The only other thing I would do is make sure you've got animation checked. Make sure that you've got bake animation checked. Make sure that the full range is selected. Deformations is fine. The other thing that you have to do is make sure that you check embed media. That's very important. And you can, for axis conversion, I just make sure that Y is up. That's kind of what the translation is going to be looking for in Unity. Unity is actually the Y is up, and Z is the opposite axis on the X. It's a little bit different from what you might be used to. FBX 2014-2015 is selected by default, and that's fine. And go ahead and click OK, and that'll export that. In Unity, I have a blank project that I created. And what I'm going to do is just to get things started. I just has nothing in it right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and make a folder for the model. So just call it models, and then I'll make a folder for textures, and I'm also right clicking, by the way, to go to create folder and then materials. Okay. And there's different ways you can get it in. I think the easiest way is just to take the folder that you had. Oops. There we go. Get back Unity. There we go. Take the folder you had, go ahead and drag it into models. So take that FBX, put it into models. If you open up if you click on this little arrow, you'll see that this has an animation built in. You can kind of see it here. You can play it. And, ooh, not much is happening, but that's gives you a sense of how that is. You can also see it's kind of fast. It might be faster than you want it to be. We're going to work on that. So let's go back to click on this object here. To get the materials to work, we're going to go ahead and say extract textures. And I'm going to go ahead and select that textures folder that I created. And then I'm going to go into extract materials, and I'm going to go back to the materials folder I created and say select folder. And that's what's actually going to get me back to that. So then if I go in to the materials folder and click on this material, I'm going to click on the swatch next to albedo. Let's see if I can get into that here. Go to textures and then go back there, drag that into albedo. And so now I've got if I right click, I can kind of spin there. There is my great white, my great red spot there. Not great white shark, great red spot. So there's my texture for the Jupiter that I created. And that's good enough. So that's how you can get some kind of simple mapping. It's just going to simply tile that on there. If I go back to materials, you can see that my materials changed. Okay, and if I go back to the model, now my model's been updated as well. So I've got the texture on there. And that's pretty much simply how you get that in there. I'm gonna go ahead and drag that asset into the world. Let me see where the heck I am here. Um, hang on a minute. I'm gonna shift. Sorry, pan over here. Grab that camera, and you can see the camera view. When I select the camera, I get the camera preview. I'm gonna go ahead and get the Jupiter kind of into a full view here. Um, and then there you go. So I can get that in there pretty close. And yeah, so there you go. And then I think if I play, yeah, okay, so nothing's happening right now, right, with the animation. So I've got to fix that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna say create animator controller. And you can rename it. I just cause I don't know, my planet animation. Okay, and then double click that to get into it. This is animation controller. I'm gonna, by default, when you import stuff, the animations are read only, and I don't like that because I want to change the speed and I want to be able to loop it. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do Control D on my keyboard. I think on Mac it might be Command D. I'm gonna duplicate. I don't know if I can get it. Yeah, I guess Command D. Fine. Duplicate that, and I can drag that into the viewer. And now I've got an animation that I can actually control. So if I click on that, I can go into speed here, and I can make that a little bit slower because boy, that's fast. And then there we go. Okay, so I've got that controller. And then if I go back to the scene, I go back to my object. If I drag that controller and see how here it says controller none, we don't want that. So drag that in there, throw the controller. And then if I go into my camera view, or if I look at it, where are you, planet? It might be gone here. Hang on a minute. Okay, sorry, I messed that up. If I click on the planet here, I need to go into, it says root position are controlled by curves. I need to change that. So if I go to apply root motion, I can reset that, and now it'll play the animation, but from the point that I move the planet to. Now you can see it's actually like rotating, and it's rotating in a circle. Sorry about that. So that's a way to get that to kind of enforce that behavior. Okay, so it's gonna rotate around. You can see it's actually rotating, slower because we changed the speed, but it's not looping. So that's kind of an issue. So in order to change that, I'm gonna go in to the controller again, and let's see here. So I go into the inspector, go to debug mode. It's going to give us some more options. So then if I go, let's see, if I go into the animation and I'm in debug mode, I can do a couple different things. I can say loop time, and that's going to loop it. And I want to go to the wrap mode. I want to change that to loop. Okay. And that's important. You have to be in debug mode because, as you probably will notice, if you're not, you don't get like most of those options. You can definitely turn on loop time, but unless you can go in to the wrap mode and change that to loop, it's not really going to do what you want it to. So let's go ahead and take a look at this again, and let's see if we're not going to get a little bit better result. I was a little bit off center with the camera here, so I'm going to try to play with that a little bit more. Okay, so let's play it back. And let's hope that it loops around like again. So it'll pretty much at this point, if you set it up the way that I've got it, it'll loop endlessly. And for the things that we're working on right now in our class, I think that's probably pretty fair. There you go. Okay, one last little thing to look at is when you are working on an object, and you're working on let's make sure I'm in debug mode again. Yeah, when you're working on the animation for these things, when you're looking at the object, so you go to the main object here, you go to debug mode. You want to make sure to uncheck the box that says resample curves. That means that you're taking the information, the data from Studio Max, and you don't want Unity to try to reinterpret it. You want to preserve it as it is. I found that this kind of creates some bugs if this is checked. Like if you allow Unity to kind of try to resample your information, it won't work. So go ahead, just again, if you're go to debug mode, click on the main object that you imported with the animation, and just uncheck resample curves. That will be on by default. Okay. Otherwise, if you follow this procedure, you should be able to import assets with basic textures, with looping animations, and that should get us a long ways towards what we're trying to accomplish with our augmented reality apps. There's all kinds of other controls that you can add with respect to animations and like triggering animations and different mapping types, but this should work for probably 95% of what you guys are looking for. So anyway, I hope that helps. I will talk to you soon. Thanks.